You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, concerns the UK's climate credentials as the hosts of COP26 could be undermined as MPs support a cut to the foreign aid budget. Could natural gas be used to create clean energy? We find out how a net zero emission power station might work. And the new addition will soon be beavering away to help flood management on Exmoor. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. And we start with a decision by MPs to support a reduction in overseas aid spending from 0.7% of gross national income to 0.5%. The government says spending on climate initiatives is protected. But with the UK hosting the crucial COP26 summit in November, a Whitehall source told Sky News the summit president Alok Sharma is concerned a failure to honour the commitment will make it harder to persuade developing countries to sign up to emissions targets. Here's what Conservative MP Tim Loughton has to say in the Commons.
Global Britain is about projecting not just military and diplomatic influence, not just about pursuing new trading and investment partnerships beyond this continent, but complementary to this is the exercise of soft power. Climate change is a major focus of it. We're chairing COP, for goodness sake. What message does that send to the rest of the world? This is a false economy at the wrong time.
Well, our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi is in Bangladesh, where Alok Sharma visited recently to discuss the issue of climate finance. And Katerina, what role does UK aid play in a country like Bangladesh, which is so vulnerable to climate change?
Well, a lot of the aid money which the UK government has spent in Bangladesh over the past decade or so has been involved in projects that have touched people dealing with the very immediate threat of climate change here in Bangladesh. We spoke with the director of one of not only Bangladesh's but the world's leading and largest NGOs. It's called BRAC, and over the past decade there's been £450 million worth of UK government money which has gone in to financing many of their projects, and a lot of those are to do with climate change, helping coastal communities deal with some of the worst weather situations that have got worse progressively because of climate vulnerabilities over the past 10 years. And the director of that organisation told us that the cut in the UK foreign aid budget was like a gut punch. It would have a dramatic impact on the people that had seen the benefits of some of those programmes over the past 10 years. But also really, Alok Sharma, when he was here, said that climate financing was such a totemic issue with regards to getting vulnerable countries on board heading into COP26. So this will be seen as another significant damage to that reputation.
Katerina, thank you. In today's other climate news, the UK's first marine park is one of 5 projects getting a share of £50 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Plymouth Sound has received nearly £10 million to help protect wildlife and explore how seagrass can be used to help the environment. Grants have also been awarded to a major experiment in wet farming and a project to preserve the Cairngorms landscape. Climate change could be treated as an emergency in the same way as coronavirus was, according to researchers. Glasgow Caledonian University Centre for Climate Justice is calling for developed countries to give more money and technology to poorer nations to help them adapt. They also want governments to share data with the public on the deaths and damage caused by extreme weather events. The UN has published a new draft of a Paris-style agreement on biodiversity with 21 proposals to protect nature. It sets out targets to reduce pesticide use, eliminate plastic pollution and put at least a third of the planet under conservation protection by 2030. The agreement will be negotiated and signed at the next Global Biodiversity Conference in October. The Environment Agency says water companies must do more to reduce serious pollution incidents. Its latest annual report found none of the 9 English water and sewerage companies achieved all of the environmental expectations set out for them for 2015 to 2020. Southern Water and South West Water were the worst performing companies for cutting pollution last year. And the Welsh Government is encouraging people to plant more trees to help Wales reach net zero by 2050. MPs are working with farmers and landowners to identify areas where new woodlands could be created. It's estimated around 86 million trees will need to be planted over the next 9 years if Wales wants to achieve its emissions targets. To the United States now, where after the warmest June on record, parts of the country are experiencing yet more extreme heat. A weather phenomenon called a heat dome has developed over the southwest, with temperatures climbing well above average during the day and then not falling much overnight. The intense heat has seen Death Valley register what could be confirmed as the highest ever recorded temperature on Earth of 54.4 degrees Celsius. Well, the severity of the hot weather has reinforced the dangers of human-induced climate change, with scientists saying that global warming is making the situation worse. Well, our correspondent Greg Milam is in Palm Springs in California for us now. So, Greg, there are experts who've expressed concern that the American West is stuck in this cycle of heat and drought and fire. Is there a plan to try and break that cycle?
Well, they're trying their best, and it certainly feels like that cycle now is somewhat inevitable. The scientists say these heat waves are getting more frequent, they're getting more intense. So what do you do about that? We know cities are looking at ways you can adapt, designing a landscape to provide more shade, for example, even talking about whether people need to work at night rather than during the day, shifting that whole way we live our lives because it's more bearable at night, although here actually at night the record temperatures, still the minimum temperatures are hitting records. One meteorologist here has said to us in the last couple of days that he can see a situation in the next couple of decades where a place like this would be uninhabitable simply because those temperatures are so hot during the summer. And of course they're used to it here. We're in the desert. It's still extreme for them here, but there are tens of millions of Americans who are experiencing these heat waves who don't usually. And that is what is unusual this year. And on top of that, of course, we have the fires, the drought, the wildfires that are more intense earlier in the year and spreading much more quickly earlier in the year. Again, something that's very different from what's happened. The heat actually is easing over the next couple of days, but the question is, after the last few weeks, that a lot of people have here is simply, when is the next one coming?
Greg, thank you. The UK's first net zero emissions power plant could be built on Teesside if plans put forward by a group of energy companies gets the go-ahead. Those involved claim that it would mean natural gas could be used to create clean and efficient, low-cost electricity. So how would it work? Well, traditional power plants generate electricity by burning natural gas as their fuel. They use a turbine. Natural gas is added along with a stream of air, which combusts and expands through this turbine, causing a generator to spin a magnet, making electricity. And because air is made up of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide and several other chemical elements, the emissions left over after the energy creation process are a blend of all of those chemicals. Now, nearly all combustion byproducts have negative effects on the environment and on our health. One way to try to reduce the harmful emissions is to capture and store them. But to do that, you need complex and expensive technology to separate out all of those chemicals. The proposed development on Teesside aims to simplify that process. Chief Executive of 8 Rivers, Cam Hosey, told us how.
Fitbit cycle, it combusts the natural gas fuel with pure oxygen as opposed to ordinary air. And as a result, the combustion product that comes through this system is pure CO2 and water, which is used to drive the turbine and to generate the electricity. Because the system itself only produces CO2 and water, the separation process to get to the pure CO2 is relatively easy and inherent in the technology itself. As a result, we end up with a pure CO2 product, which can then be taken away and sequestered underground.
But would this process really result in fewer emissions? And is that the same as net zero? Well, joining me now is Dr. Mai Bowie, a specialist in carbon capture and senior research associate at the Centre for Environmental Policy at Imperial College London. Welcome to you. Do you think this could be a game changer, a way of reducing our emissions?
Yes, indeed. So carbon capture and storage is well recognised as a fairly essential technology in our transition towards net zero. When you're looking at different sectors, so for example, in the power sector, you need these types of CCS technologies to kind of provide dispatchable, reliable power to help balance the intermittency of renewables. In the industrial sector, there's not many other options, so you need carbon capture and storage technologies to help reduce emissions there. So overall, across different sectors, you've got the need for CCS and also for CO2 removal to kind of get net negative emissions to kind of offset other emissions where we can't abate CO2.
And presumably the technologies are different depending on which sector you're talking about. How advanced are we in those technologies here in the UK?
Yes, so normally there's a portfolio of different technologies and they have different levels of technology readiness level, or TRL. And the good news is that we do have technologies at that higher TRL level and ready to kind of deploy today. So if we wanted to do carbon capture and storage, it is very much possible to do, just using these sort of higher, more advanced developed technologies.
And in the future, how big a role do you think that power plants with carbon capture will play in the race to net zero? Or do you think the main focus will remain on renewables?
So I think it's a combination of all the different technologies, and it's better to kind of minimize the risk in our transition to try to use a portfolio of technologies and diversify. And so the issue with renewables is the intermittency, because if the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing, we don't have energy. And you can still have batteries energy, but it's slightly maybe not quite there yet in terms of the large scale capacities that we may need, and also in terms of the cost. So having CCS as sort of the backup will definitely be needed.
Dr. Mai, thanks very much indeed. And finally, the National Trust says the first baby beaver to be born on Exmoor for 400 years has been captured on camera. The baby, known as a kit, was filmed at the charity's Holnacut estate in Somerset, where the animals were reintroduced last year. The beavers help with natural flood management and improve biodiversity on the estate. Well, that's everything from us for today. On tomorrow's show, Sky Sports News hits the road in an electric car, visiting sports venues across the south of England on a mission to go green. Thanks for watching. See you then.